I am delighted today to welcome Ondrej Papanek to the show. Ondrej is an Agile coach and Scrum Master extraordinaire is revolutionizing businesses and igniting collaboration with his unrivaled expertise in Agile methodologies. With an unwavering dedication to unleash the true potential of companies, Ondrej has left an indelible mark on esteemed Fortune 500 giants, including Apple, H&M Group, Volvo, Scania Group, and Colt Technology. What truly distinguishes Ondrej is his exceptional talent for orchestrating workshops and fostering a culture of teamwork, alignment, and perpetual growth. With this unwavering commitment to cultivating safe and inclusive environments, he empowers teams to engage in transformative dialogues and innovative problem solving. Ondrej, welcome to the show.
Hello, Nika. It's my pleasure to be with you today and have a discussion about Agile and the transformation, which we can see a lot of companies going through when they're implementing Agile and also digitalization last few years.
Yeah,
I
it's
will share a little bit.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, I want to share a bit story about me. As you mentioned, working for big international companies, my background is also IT. I used to be the IT guy, called as the IT support engineer, IT administrator responsible for IT infrastructure. I was helping with, a lot of day-to-day tasks in the companies and also users struggling every single day. I wasn't able to have a bigger impact outside of the team, IT department, and management and stakeholders. So lately, I was introduced to Lean and later Scrum when I saw the potential how Scrum can help companies be more productive and also deliver value, the service, which is more meaningful for the customer, right? And I was working as a Scrum Master and later went on today I'm Agile Coach, helping company with Agile way of working and also coaching team members.
Brilliant. It's Agile is something that I've been knocking around the project management arena for, what is it now? I'm trying to work out the maths, 20, 28, 6 years, something like that. And obviously in the last, I'd say 10 years, Agile as a methodology, an approach, has it's funny in project management, it's not a project management method, but it's kind of been co-opted by a lot of people as it being a project management method. It's the that I'm sure that everyone on who's listening to the show is aware, but for those who aren't, it sort of had its form. The Agile and Scrum had its form sort of way back in the 70s with dev teams rather than IT dev teams, and has kind of morphed into this beast around the world. And I suppose think it with me, it's kind of I look where it is now, and it's come a long way, and lots of businesses are um, we're agile, but they want to be Spotify. They want to be one of the big IT companies, the Spotify approach or whatever, all these different things. And it seems to be a lot of businesses go, right, send a load of people on, get them Scrum Master certified and a couple of product owner certified people, and right, then we're doing agile now, and then everything they throw around it, they don't change the business to be agile. They just change projects to be agile, which is the wrong thing. And Adrian on Adrian Pine on the call, who I know is ferocious on LinkedIn with people around when they start talking about um, agile as a project management methodology versus waterfall. But you've got that approach of agility, but that other rigid reporting and how they crash against each other. And I struggle with that coming from that traditional approach to project management, and then I want to know when you're going to complete something. Um, but that's the wrong question. I know that's the wrong question. But the organisations that I'm in always want that same answer. And I guess with you, agile coaching organisations, you get that tension a lot. It's kind of the future. How do you see organisations really changing agile in the future?
Well, I can see the same kind of confusion as you mentioned. They see Agile as project management. And I think it's mostly when company try to just plug in the Scrum or Agile way of working. Sometimes we use Agile way of working as buzzwords. When I end up in the companies and I see what they done, they don't even sometimes follow the Agile manifesto or the Scrum values. I think it's our message of Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, Scrum trainers to spread the message what is Agile, what are the values of the Agile, and also make a better meaning of the Agile in the world, right? As you mentioned, there are a lot of people on LinkedIn and other social platforms where they're recorrecting people. This is not project management, it's Agile is methodology, and Agile has 40 plus frameworks which are used in different environments from software, manufacturing, to marketing, to HR departments. And I think the future of Agile is also kind of, Agile, it's also very adaptable. We can see it as last few years when COVID hit, everyone has to work from the office. Recently, collaboration tools like Zoom, Miro, Mural, and others really increase the users, numbers. And this also changed the way as we work because instead of office, we have to use these digital platforms. There was so much education on it. Like everyone want to contribute, provide value. And I saw that where a lot of people want to collaborate. Yes, we have the Zoom or Teams, but coming back from have the service or product in front of us and have instead the digital form is becoming very challenging. And that's the place where the HR coaches will jump and help the company with this transformation. Sometimes this transformation is forced by digitalization, right? And COVID was one of the biggest movement of this. And recently we can see this also coming back slowly to the office, but teams are collocated across the Europe, across the world. So that means some of us, we are in the office, some of us, we working from home or different offices. And again, we need these digital tools to help us to collaborate together. And this is the place where also the Scrum Master or Agile Coach step in because we wearing a lot of responsibilities, but also hats, right? So we are the trainers, we are the coaches, we are the mentors. Sometimes we are the facilitators. And I see when facilitator is more needed than never before because I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are working and they always complain. We're spending hours and hours in the meetings. There is not output. There is not where we should follow. We don't know. And that's the place where the facilitator, which is kind of one of the heads of Scrum Master and Agile Coach, can step in. Data even show in research where research was done in the United States and they show 4 to 8 hours employee spending meetings which are not necessary, which also reflects the company losing about $25,000 yearly on these meetings, which are kind of almost useless. So it's our message of Agile coaches, make this more efficient and also like Agile, it's flexible, it's adaptable almost every environment.
It's interesting when you talk about the meetings. I've seen that situation where, and maybe it's the environments I've worked in, but sometimes where you have everyone, like the whole concept of right, we've got a team, they're a great team. We've got a scrum master, and they're working across 3 or 4 teams, or an agile coach working across 3 or 4 teams. The scrum master doesn't need to be at all of the daily stand-ups, but they do tend to, in my experience. But then everybody wants to do their daily stand-up at 9:15 every morning, so you've got people with 6 different project teams that they're Scrum Master for all meeting together, and they can't ever attend all of them at the same time. Whether they should or not is another question entirely, and that's kind of again, it's a little bit of um, drifting into that agile at scale kind of conversation, isn't it? Where actually, if you've got a team, you've got them all there, they're delivering it, that's great. But when you've got those same people on three or four teams because they're an expert across something, and it probably goes against the concepts of managing it that way. And if they're bringing in, you haven't got a team that just brings in work that comes into them. They're formed to deliver one specific thing, but it's not a full time thing. So they have other things that come into a hopper, but they're separate Scrum teams. How have you worked with those sort of scenarios?
I could say it's quite challenging this environment scaled agile, especially for Scrum Masters. If we have one Scrum Master responsible for more than 2 or 3 Scrum teams or agile teams, sometimes we call. I think the Scrum Master usually spend more time over in new form Scrum teams where the Scrum Master is more needed. After a few weeks or months, this Scrum team is more efficient, so the Scrum Master is not needed every single daily Scrum or stand-up. That's the place where he can spend more time in the new teams. Also, it's good to sometimes show up and not to be there, or even sometimes listen and be in the background and give them feedback, once they finish the daily Scrum. Because the Scrum team can run the daily Scrum or stand up without Scrum Master. Scrum Master is to help them, to guiding them, to sometimes give the good direction, right, towards accomplish the sprint goal, not to have this kind of traditional 3 questions stand up, which was kind of also sometimes like status meeting for many of them. At least it's my experience. And lately, like, we have options where the Scrum Master is also software developer, and that can be options when the team lead can have the background of the IT guy and also be a Scrum Master. That's also an option. It's not that common, but it's also good to have it. I was in a situation when I was a Scrum Master. I was responsible for multiple teams, and one of the team lead wanted to become a Scrum Master. So I gave him some training, education. He got through certification. After a few weeks, actually 2-3 months, he was able to really step in and takes over. So I was very satisfied how he performed when it comes to daily Scrum and later retrospective and other Scrum events. There are a lot of other challenges, but there are ways how we can solve this. Of course, I can see big enterprise companies, they hire Scrum Master for multiple Scrum teams, and this is very challenging. I believe a Scrum Master can handle 2, maximum 3 Scrum teams. It also depends how many members of Scrum teams we have
It
there.
makes sense because at the end of the day, and I've tried to do I've tried to use some of the Scrum Master training that I've had on projects, but we haven't been running proper agile teams, so it hasn't really. We've used the tools rather than become properly agile. But I can see the point of where if you're really going to be, it's difficult sometimes to look at what the role of the Scrum Master is, and people get confused of that with that, and that role isn't just to make sure everyone attends the meetings and set up the meetings and do that kind of thing, is it? It's to be there to help solve the problems outside of those stand-ups. So you have your stand-up, and then outside it, right, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem, right. So they can work with those individuals to unblock them. And sometimes we all get dragged into those conversations of where you've got a 15-minute stand-up that lasts an hour because you're trying to solve the problems in that call or in that meeting, instead of going, are you blocked? What do you need? Okay, I'll come and talk to you later. I'll come and talk to you. Because that's what we're meant to do, aren't we, as a Scrum Master? We're meant to listen to what's going on there. If there's something that's blocking someone, that's when our ears should prick up, or they should be telling us on their Jira board or whatever, I'm blocked on this. I need your help. What can you do about it? Sometimes you're blocked externally and then you can't do anything about it, but but then maybe you can. I don't know. It feels sometimes as if there's a tendency to want to try and discuss the full topic in the session, and I've seen that tension between team members who really want to go in and out, go on and get on with the role, and others who are quite happy to say, well, yeah, and that's it, but this is the issue, and then try and detail the full issue and try and solve the problem in that conversation. How do you deal with those situations in your experience?
Thank you for sharing with me. I was one of this situation quite recently, and I can see like people who want to talk, they want to express themselves, and that's quite difficult in 15 minutes
Yeah,
events, right? Daily Scrum. I think to give space each person, like eventually like the same time for each person, it might be an option. Also, like people who want to talk, they like to share a lot of stories. Maybe if they can be like, straightforward, more direct, and also like address what is the blocker or stopping you to address the spring goal. And if you don't have the time, you are able to connect with other members of the team after the daily scrum. And this is the space when you can collaborate and solve the problem on individual level with a group of people instead of all of them, because there might be some problems when they might need some decision from the product owner or managers. Okay, that can be addressed there. But if something small things, it doesn't stop you, but is a problem that can be addressed after daily scrum. And I think the scrum master is also there to say, can we please shift this topic and focus something what is the more important during daily scrum, and with something else, more detail that we can discuss it later. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure because companies they like meetings, right? And sometimes I had members where they say, sorry, I don't have time. I was called from our manager to be in other meetings, collaborate with other teams. And then I see, okay, the manager doesn't know their daily scrum. The scrum member of the scrum team, they should be there. So I have to stand up and talk to the manager. Please don't call our developers during our daily scrum. I was also in one company when they say from 9 to 9:15, this is the dedicated time for every Scrum team. They have the daily Scrum or stand up. We can't have any meetings as managers with them. So dedicate the time and some talk even outside of the Scrum team managers, stakeholders. Make dedicated time for it.
it's interesting. So that in that instance, they're reserving that time in that organisation. That's when they have their scrums, or was that one where they suggested that and it didn't work? What was that?
There was a lot of interaction with managers. They want to pick up a software developer or a member of the Scrum team at any time. And as I mentioned, I was in the situation where I missed half of the team because they were in other team activities or meeting, which was more
Okay,
important
yeah, I
according to
see.
managers. So yeah. So I have to really talk to them, and I said, no, this is dedicated time. It's just 15 minutes per day from the 8 hours we used to spend in the company. It's very little time. Please give us the time. It was just one example.
Yeah, it's funny, and there are a lot of things that, as you say, are important, that people deem more important, but it's typically they're more urgent rather than important. If you um, it's having that habit of it being that time when you do it and you do it every day. And I've been guilty of it myself where when I was a session that I just but I think the thing there is how do you do that at an organizational level? How do you get maybe it's a step back from that when you're going into an organization and they are saying, right, we're agile or we want to be agile, and they have either a preconception of what they think agile means, which is incorrect, or what they've implemented so far. They said, we've implemented agile, it's not working. we don't think it works. And then actually you'll go in there and find that they've not implemented agility within their organization. What do you do when you go to organizations like that?
Sure. So when I'm going to organization, I have a conversation with them. Like, I ask them what agile means to you, right? And with their answers, I can see what it's agile in their kind of eyes, in their world, integrated in their company. I also even ask like, what kind of framework do you use? And this kind of questions. And these questions leads me, okay, they're lacking with agile way of working, they're lacking maybe some expertise, maybe they have their own scrum masters, they don't know how they are skilled, where they were working before, and this kind of things. So when organization is implementing agile, ask them about agile, also which frameworks you are familiar with most, right? And then we usually choose the frameworks. I'm starting from the top management, stakeholders even, and go to the teams later. And also I ask them, like, if we're using agile, have you done this organization restructuring, right? Because like project management and waterfalls, they like the control, from the top, the managers to the employees. But in agile, we promote more self-organizing teams where managers should trust the Scrum team. And I see this kind of many organizations is lacking. So, and the reorganization is very important to make the team more autonomous, so they can freely sometimes take even decision without management, right? So, but it's also like I see when the management try to do this, but they don't trust the Scrum team, the product owner even sometimes. And I think that's even bigger problem. They have to create a trust, to create a trust, some psychological safety should be also, be there, of course. That's the next step. So we maybe choose the frameworks. We maybe done the organization restructuring, or we are willing to make the organization restructuring. And then later I'm educate the management and also Scrum team. What are the agile principles? So I'm going a bit deeper, maybe one form of workshops, practicing. And later when we go deeper and department by departments, later we form a Scrum team, we establish the roles like Agile coaches, if they have Scrum masters and product owners. So this is kind of important, right? So when we have these roles introduced, some people go to the certification, education, and training, as mentioned before. Then we go more on the individual level, where we also talk about agile practices, incorporate agile practices into exciting workflow, introduce sprint, and going to product backlog, and this kind of things. And this also includes Scrum events. And of course, we have these roles. We know what our responsibility for product owner and also developers, UI, backend, frontend, and even others roles. Then we can also, we need also some tools. What tools they are using? Is this tool suitable, to have a product backlog, sprint backlog? Many big organizations using different services, ClickUp, Jira, and a few others. Sometimes they have to make decision to make something more suitable or open to test some other tools, which is more suitable for the software developers, for example. It's manufacturing might be other suitable software. It sometimes depends what technology they are working with, and also what is the service or product. So mention agile tools as the collaboration, as mentioned a few minutes ago, Miro, Miro, and others. And then we have the tools, we have introduced roles, and we also running first sprint. Sometimes we just have sprint 0 just to try how is it, right? And then we take from there and continuous improvement, right? We're running Scrum events, and we also learning from our mistake. So continuous improvement, part of Kaizen, right? And also Agile. We review and reflect to make always better improvement. Be open for feedback, which is part of also retrospective, one of the events. And then me as Agile Coach providing support for Scrum teams and management as well. And that might be like a few months or even over a year. It really depends, which framework they use and how big is the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting there because it is. I think some people think it's a quick fix, and it takes time to get an organization, to get a team uh, using these processes and using them in a way, in an effective way, and modifying the way they work together just to correct stuff. And you've got to go through a number of iterations in order to understand that. And it might be at the end of that, sometimes at the end of that project, you've got a really humming team, and then boom, they've got off to the four winds, and then they don't come back again. How do you in your creating those self-managing teams, how do you make sure that those teams are performing quickly and are able to um, trust each other, which I think is one of the key things there, and kind of um, work together as a unit rather than as individuals? What do you do to solve that?
Yeah, that also depends. Sure, that also depends on the side of the company, even the department, right? Sometimes we start the agile transformation in one department or with few teams, we see how that goes. If it gets really well, we spread to other departments. And then we can also use like if this Scrum team is really work really well after a few weeks or let's say 3-4 months, they can be example to other teams, to other departments. So they can motivate others, right? They can invite others to some Scrum events like sprint review and see how the Scrum event looks like and what is it to just get the feeling. And we also might have some workshop or collaboration together so they can learn each other. So we introduced the Agile in for a few teams and one department, and then we can spread it even more, but slowly. And also like big organization, it's also important they have more than one agile coach, right? So one can focus on management, whether on Scrum team or even stakeholders. It's a lot of responsibility, and also we have to collaborate. It's challenging when it's possible. And yeah, I mean, usually when the team used to work with software development and with some tools, it's quite it's take less time from my experience working and implement agile. If the agile is completely new and they're switching for waterfall, it take longer. There might be some resistance for some employees. Why are we changing this? Why are we using these new tools? Why are we going to sprints, compared to finish one thing and then start another one, instead of being in loops for 2 or 4 weeks and get feedback, improvement, and always get a better way of working. As I said, bigger organization takes longer and
Yeah,
is more challenging. And also, if they're willing to able to learn something, if there's resistance, it's take longer. I also was working in an organization where they choose one framework, they figure out after 1 year it doesn't work, then we have to switch something more, not that
yeah,
robust, something
yeah. I can
simple.
imagine that. So, think you mentioned a few organisations earlier on. We've mentioned in your intro that you've worked with. What I'm guessing that not everything's gone swimmingly every time you've worked with one of those organisations, and war stories are always interesting. from a delivery point of view. Tell it what sort of projects have you had that have been or organisations that have been particularly challenging, and what were the challenges, and what did you do to get over them?
Sure. So in some organization was mostly working with IT, but also another organization was focusing mostly in agile and transformation. I want to say I was also working with one of the Swedish fashion brand, and I had the opportunity to work with a very design focused people where they are more creative
Hmm.
instead of coding code. And I find out their mindset is a little bit different. They like to creating something, make something, enjoyable. They're very proud of, might be design, might be make, I don't know, some sketches, some 3D model, might be some animated video, which can be reflected in different ways for marketing purposes, for print out and other social media and other stuff. And the one things what really open my mind, they're lacking a little bit of discipline. I have to remind them we have a sprint review. Do you have everything ready to showcase what we accomplish in sprint, right? They like to use like digital tools like Miro and Miro and Whiteboard, where they like to put all the stickies together and connect them, right? They don't like go to Jira and make this user story there. So they really prefer do everything in Miro, create a user story deck on the sticky, and it's there. But then we lacking like who is the assignee, story points, and this kind of things. Luckily, Miro has integration between Jira and the digital whiteboard, which is Miro. So we use the plugin, and was I think it's very good because they started the, let's say, the user story description, the name, in the yellow sticky in Miro, but in the moment they can flip it, connect to the Jira and connect sprint. That means they come later to the Jira tickets or story or other epics maybe even, and they have the description, like the title of it, and later they can assign to correct person, and they can go even like deeper, right? What is about the user story, why we're delivering this, and so far so forth. And this was kind of very new for me. I have to even remind them, you have user story, but it's just title. It's
Yeah.
empty. There's no description. So what I did, I kind of print screen them and remind them on Teams, hello, please fill this for me. Otherwise, we cannot start
Yeah, I
sprint.
can. It's funny, isn't it? It's because I know I had a scenario where we were running with using a Jira board, and the team were creating all of the different things on it, and no, but all they were was a list. There was no sizing on it. There was no uh, detailing. It was kind of how long is that? It's a design document. How long is that going to take? Well, it's going to take a while, and it's kind of, and I'm there going, and again, trying to understand, are we going to finish it in the sprint? Are we able to put in that sprint? What's the burn down going to look like? And I was never able to get that data. I was so frustrated because I couldn't get that story point view, or even when I think I did eventually, but even when we did, the problem was that a lot of these things were going to last for several weeks. They hadn't broken them down into pieces of work that could be there, and they were very technical people. They were writing technical documents, and maybe that was the wrong thing to be doing at that time. But it might you could, in theory, you can break it down into chunks and say, well, this is where I'm going, so you can track progress. But to them, it didn't matter. But I had nothing to hold their feet to the fire. And it's like same when you're doing I kind of nobody knew when they were going to finish it, and therefore something that someone else was dependent on the team didn't know it, so it never quite gelled. And I maybe I was just noticing lots of memes of pictures on a Friday where you got pictures of a person sitting there tapping something or drumming their fingers, and it's kind of like Scrum Master waiting for team to update Jira tickets. And it's kind of seems to be an endemic, or a project manager or whatever. It seems to be quite an endemic scenario, that there is that resistance on reporting. And I don't think this is agile, because um, I know throughout my career, convincing people to understand that telling someone you've done a piece of work is part of doing the piece of work. It isn't a bit of admin on top, reporting on what we're doing. We're in organizations because we want to leverage the capabilities of lots of people. If all those people do stuff and never tell anyone that they've done it, well, no one knows that it's been done. So it's kind of, yeah, and no one knows that they can start the next bit. So that whole reporting process has to be, um, and it's difficult, I find, to get that value to those individuals who are doing that. And I wonder whether that's because I've not worked in these proper self-managing teams, where actually that updating within themselves, as long as John's done his code, he can tell Jackie, she can test it. Why do we need to put it on the board? Jackie knows she can test it. I just told her in the stand up. It's those kind of things of how you get that value of that reporting, um, as being what's in it for me, other than it keeps the scrum master or the product owner or the project manager off their back. How have you addressed those sort of challenges?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As you mentioned, like Jira is a great tool. It's getting better, but still has some limitation. And I think we shouldn't see this as reporting tools. Yes, stakeholders like it, some managers, but I see this as a with collaboration tools is
Yeah,
because it's about transparency. So me as Scrum Master, I can see what is in to-do column, right? What is done. Maybe they have another streamline, like what is blocker, and we can use it later to address it, right? Because otherwise we might not achieve a sprint goal or delivery of our increment. There are some good plugins for Jira which help us to get notification when someone move, user story from to do, doing, or even done, to get a notification on Slack and other platforms. That's also optional, but I see challenge like me as Scrum Master or even Agile coaches to like we finish the sprint and like okay, we get some report from Jira, it's quite basic, show us how many user stories we had and how many we accomplished, right? The kind of capacity as well. But it's quite difficult to see who accomplished more. But it's not about comparing, but it's also about transparency, who done less. So I have to go deeper and see, okay, John accomplished this and this. Andrew was sick, was a zero. Jeremy was maybe, half of it. I think like there are ways how we can address it. Like story points are most like optional. It's not a must. It's not prescribed. And this is one way how we can have story points. We can have different, gummy bears, whatever, and whatever we use for kind of estimating. I think maybe try to go with a measurement or user stories and later implement them. And like also takes like sprints, to establish good delivery. We cannot compare us with other teams. Other teams might have doing something else. It's not about comparison. I see Jira as a transparency to see where we are today, what we are delivering, and what we are focusing on. That's my takeaway mostly for Jira. It's a software as we can see as a tools to help us to see where we are today and where we are heading to, and have a little bit track of information what's happening. Otherwise, yes, I can ask Johnny, what have you done today? Oh yeah, I fixed the bug, in Java. Now we can release it. Maybe yes, maybe finish with sprint, we release it and see. Oh, the bug is still there, right? And that's wrong. It's good for transparency. You're able to also connect Jira with documentation, for example, Confluence. So when it's the bug, we can document how to fix it and connect the bug to the user story when this was discovered. And later, when the bug comes again, we can just search in Confluence and find, oh, this was in this scenario for this and this release. And of course, Jira can be connected with other tools, which really helping us connect everything together. I don't see this as a glue connected together, but simplify our processes. If we have to go just Confluence, disconnect it from Jira and maybe put just a link, but instead we can put the link and just click on it and we are there. Maybe, as I mentioned, we have something planned like story mapping in Miro, and now we have digital forms, so we don't have to do double work. We just connect with Jira, and we can take the user stories and put in the product backlog and later into the sprint. So I see tools as a way which simplify our processes, our work. Of course, we shouldn't use tools too much, because sometimes, like, I come to this organization, they have one tools for design, one other tools for cloud services, and they have different providers, each providers or vendors using the different platform. Sometimes I feel it's kind of junk of tools. So sometimes the tools might be an
I
obstacle,
think
not
there
a
is that. I
solution.
find myself before, but where maybe when I've been kicking off pieces of work where I've been, I'm quite a, because of its simplicity, I quite like Microsoft Planner. So in some, not so much in full delivery projects, but more along the sort of where we've got continuous improvement, internal continuous improvement projects, where it's kind of um, using it as a place to gather and everyone can access through Teams and stuff like that. I find it quite useful, but I know that there is a level of integration with those items then into Outlook, and then beyond that to the to do items. So essentially, you'll have a ticket that's yours on the planner board that is also showing up on your Microsoft To Do, which is also showing up in your tasks in Outlook, and then the next logical step
Mm.
for me is integration with Microsoft Project, um, so that you can be in that situation where whichever tool you prefer as an individual, you can go in, you can see what's on the needed, you can update it, you can mark it complete, I think that's where it really adds the power, because all of us prefer different tools. And actually, most organizations of a certain size have got a lot of these tools. And with a little bit of thinking, a little bit of tweaking, they can all be the same thing, and it doesn't matter where you are. And I think that's a productivity goal I've been trying to get to. And yet, Microsoft SharePoint list, and then once you've got that list, so you say you've got your board, you've got the to-do list, you've got it all collated, you've got it in a plan. You can then use Power BI to do burn down charts, and you can start getting in that whole uh, integration of task management and planning and collaboration and documentation. And I can see maybe I focus on the tools a little bit too much, but I can see this panacea that would I can see it in my mind, and I play with it every so often to try and get it to work. And there's always somewhere there's a little trip wire where it doesn't quite integrate the way I want to, in order for me to be able to go, yeah, yes, let's just use all this. But I'll get there. I'll find it. I'll work it out, even if it's writing Power Automate scripts myself.
I think so. You're right, and especially like Microsoft, the tools for collaboration, the kind of whiteboard as well. They have Teams, and Teams you can integrate with others, like closer to Outlook, so you can see the meetings there. And quite recently, also Microsoft have some small application in
Yeah.
Teams, like to-do lists and this kind of things. It's really beneficial. A Microsoft project and Microsoft Dynamic and other things. So if you have one environment from one company, explore what they have, so you don't have to look for others tools maybe. And it's much better because it's much better integrated. In the moment when you have one software provider and you bring other one, it takes some time to integrate it together. Sometimes you can via API, sometimes it's quite difficult, integrate it. So yeah, that's a good point. I totally agree. Sometimes I end up in companies like the huge companies, they have 1,000 employees. They have one tools for one department, and the other department has something else, like even like alternative. And like, why do you choose another tools if you're already using alternative, which is more suitable? Instead, invest of resources or agencies who can make some, beneficial software, something customized for you, or make maybe a small department who only creating tools and collaboration or integration for the whole organization. You save more and you have
I
full
think
control
it's
on it
funny
as
because
well.
you've got to, where you have all these little fiefdoms, and I'm probably one of these fiefdoms that creates his own thing and tries to use some of the software we've got in there, but I don't go out and buy software. But um, I think I wonder whether there's, um, the bigger the organization, the more likely that is to happen because there's bigger organizations have their taste fancy, but in smaller organizations, there's probably a little bit more flexibility as well. So you can go out and just install software on your laptop, although that's changed these days with a lot of the cyber stuff. So protecting it. And I just wonder whether I look at things that are the tooling we can get bogged down by. We've got all this tooling. We spent several £1 million on Jira licenses, on whatever licenses to do to Primavera type things or anything. Any of these software companies now, you can buy a an agile toolkit, I'm sure, and I think it makes me wonder how do you get, because those tools are great, but if you haven't got an agile mindset in the organization, you might as well not have them, had you?
That's a very good point. I think like mostly IT department designing this kind of tools like Office 365 integration, Microsoft
Yeah,
projects, and also together with Teams and other things. But like, I come in the company say, well, you're trying to do something, but people who designed this, they don't know so much about agile processes, right? And this kind of things. And I think when I say Scrum Master, Agile Coach should know about this kind of tools and even advise the organization how should this be designed. Otherwise,
yeah,
the tools might be more problem than solution for them because the tools might be limited. The organization maybe doesn't have the resources or the knowledge. When you don't have knowledge, try to invest. Someone who has the knowledge. I'm talking about vendors who can design the software for you and is more suitable for the Scrum team or even
yeah,
organization moving
yeah.
to Agile.
It's interesting. It makes me think about organizations again. Going back to my question earlier about the problems that you had with organizations you go in there. I suppose if I'm a business owner, if I'm a person tasked with setting up a program to turn my organization agile, what one thing would you say that is what would you recommend that they do to make to as a first step?
It's a very good question. I think it will be find out what they want to accomplish with the tools or software, what we put it in and what we get out from it. If you implement Agile, okay, can we report? Can we have sprints there? Can we have assignee for each user story or task or epic, whatever is it? Is it suitable, or even it is customizable? If it's not, or it's very limited, probably it's not good tools for us. Probably we have to look at
Yeah, that
for
makes sense.
alternative.
And I suppose that you've got businesses that are implementing agile and have stalled maybe. What would you say to those organisations who say like, well, we've tried to do it, and I guess you've probably been into organisations that have tried to be agile, turn agile, and have either hit the rocks with it or have given up on it, and then are retrying it again because they think they should. What um again, a similar sort of question. What is the most important thing that you talk to them about when you go into those organisations?
That's a very good question. Like I end up sometimes in businesses or companies where they try to do agile,
Yeah.
but they failed. They realize, okay, sometimes was agile promoted from the Scrum team, but there's managers and stakeholders. They are very resistant, and that's quite common problem I can see. Doesn't matter sometimes how big is the organization, and that's fake quite easily because the management stakeholders, they may be used to do project management waterfall whatever, but that's not really agile, right? It's not that flexible, and that's a that's a problem. And in this case I talked to mostly the management stakeholders why they don't invested some resources to get more familiar with agile before that was integrated, or implemented, because people want to do it. They have Scrum Masters or product owners and Scrum team. They know, they have knowledge. Maybe they came from other organization, very familiar with agile way of working or some frameworks, but managers and stakeholders, and they resist. And I say that's the space where Agile Coach can come and really educate the management and stakeholders, make some workshops, make them more familiar, and then implement the agile values from the top and go to the next level managers and employees and Scrum teams, product owners, and others. That's one example when I see kind of resistance from managers and stakeholders. Sometimes I come to the organization, they're very big, they implement some of the skills, agile frameworks. They try for 1 year, but still they don't see results. So they try to kind of shifting or adjust or customize, which is fine. We are able to customize the frameworks. But sometimes I suggest they're just pretending to doing something. So that's probably a change where they can try another framework from Agile, more suitable and not so much heavy when it comes to responsibility and roles. And use this in a small team, and then go maybe one department and maybe use, Scrum or other frameworks which are not that heavy or connected, to
Cool. Cool.
control and other
So
things.
notice we're coming up onto to quite onto nearly onto the hour soon. Um, I can't really have a conversation, and I haven't really been pushing this really over the last couple of months as things have started to ramp up, but I probably should. It really is about AI and how how do you think AI will impact on agile adoption, on agile tooling, um, over the coming 6, 12. The pace of the AI is incredible. And how do you obviously it's going to affect all facets of our life. But from an agile perspective and the way that we do that agile and way that we implement agile, how can you do you see AI? Where do you see AI impacting on that?
Well, as we can see, AI exploded the last few months, and companies really trying it or exploring it. And I think AI, we should see as a tool which help us be more effective, accomplish more. For example, software team, right? It's already AI kind of writing documentation. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. There's also AI in GitHub. Microsoft will be pushing AI a lot. We will see soon a release of Copilot, right, in big organizations, where it's kind of helping us be more productive. AI might perform some tests, for releases before we go to the public with the software, can help us make processes faster and simple. I don't see AI as a replacement of some function in the software development, as I see AI as a tool which help us be more productive and accomplish maybe more in a short period of time. It's good to explore AI and try new things, but also be careful because, we giving a lot of information to big organization and we don't know where the information end up. So yeah, be careful what we do,
Yeah.
but we should be
I never
open
thought about
for
that before, about the fact
exploration.
that and it's popping in my head there, is that it, there's probably quite a bit of legacy code knocking around in lots of organizations where documentation hasn't been that great, or documentation has disappeared. And then you'll be looking at that code and you'll have to have a developer or an architect, engineer going through that line by line and trying to understand what it does, what table constraints might be on there, all these different things. And I suppose that's an opportunity going forward where using that automation thing is kind of right. Go through it, find all of the different routes through this code. There's your document. Okay, so that's what we've written. There, right? So again, test wise, you can automate that testing, and if not just automate the testing, but automate the identification of the tests that you should be doing, as well as documenting what it's doing. I can see that. I'd not thought about that before. And just whether you meant it, I've seen the things where people are using. I've used it myself. Actually, I was as an experiment. I was trying to use ChatGPT to write a plugin to Chrome to download my ChatGPT chats, and it
Wow.
and I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to create a Google plugin extension, and I managed to get an extension that ran, compiled, didn't quite do what I wanted to perfectly, but with no knowledge whatsoever of how to do that. And it took me an hour to be able to generate something like that, which absolutely shocked me. And I just, that kind of thing is gonna, um, you can see that speeding up of that developer sort of real gnarly bits, and rather than the hack away bits, it's their interpretation, their best way of doing it, that they'll be able to work out and use that, and they'll be able to use their power that way. And but then I can see the agility side of it, of that, of how do we use, how does it impact it, because the pace of what we'll do in theory will become quicker, and you may have those self-managing teams, or maybe we'll have self-managing bots for a little while, and then a QA expert developer checking it afterwards. I don't know, and I know that kind of galls with a lot of people on the fact that the actual creation of the art, which is in some ways coding, is an art form, a bit like, and that's where a lot of the joy comes from, not the actual output. That changes the dynamic of those teams and what they're doing and what they're contributing. To me, it feels like it's going to be a fascinating future and terrifying.
For me, it's also
Yeah,
fascinating, and also you have to be careful how we use the AI, right?
yeah,
Because AI is getting smarter and smarter every single day. As you mentioned, you created your plugin for the Google Chrome. There are already AI kind of
yeah,
platforms where AI can create website for you. AI can create even application without coding it. So that's mean software development it's also open other people without knowing the code, which is quite fascinating because we are able to perform something without coding and have background even in IT or software development. Maybe the competition might be harder,
Yeah,
but I think
change.
it's also open opportunity to a lot of other people.
Yeah, it's changing,
It
isn't
is
it? Rather than,
fascinating, but
and it's
also
evolving.
quite
And
scary.
this is what happens with all industrial revolutions, and we all know that, is that it changes the dynamic of the work we're doing. It's actually, I think there was something I was reading. This is the first time that it's kind of impacting on white collar workers as much, whereas it used most of these revolutions of technology has generally impacted on blue collar worker roles and jobs. Now it's stepping into that white collar. There seems to be a bit more hoo ha, isn't it? When you start saying, right, it's going to be easier to use AI to work out a lawyer's
Yes,
pitch
the
than it will
one.
be to have a lawyer sitting trawling through papers and evidence. That makes you think, well, yeah, and those people who are making very large sums for doing that have not all that knowledge, and you kind of press a button and it does half the work. You obviously need more stuff on top of it, but it does half the work for them, doesn't it?
Yes, you're right. And there are already some tools which, for example, instead of hire some agency to write a report to airlines for lost luggage, you can do it with assistant of AI. Just few clicks, cost less, but is more efficient. It's quite scary, but also like it's a new technology. Imagine like 10 years ago, we have kind of first AI kind of Siri first assistant. We use it, then other companies also integrate it. And we have the smart speakers, right? 4 or 5 years ago. And then some a car company also integrated a assistant in the cars. And now like last 7, 8 months, the AI just exploded because now
Yeah,
has smart chatbots, can code for you code, can also find information on the internet, can write you essay, can generate you picture, even a video or human voice, which is generated by AI. It's very
yeah,
difficult
yeah,
to even recognize sometimes it's human or AI. And this is just the beginning. And now we can see even AI is creating application without coding. So where we will be next, 6 months, like 2024.
yeah.
It's quite
So
scary, but also exciting.
just we kind of come up on time now. It's kind of if people want to talk more, find out, get involved with you, or find out, just stalk you on internet or whatever. Where's the best place for them to get in touch?
Sure. The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn to search for my name, Ondrej Papanek. You can also look at my webpage, itmanagement.consulting, about my services. And also, if you look at on Miroverse, you can search for retrospective
Okay,
templates, and
cool.
there's also one
Yeah, and Andre,
stand-up
for those that are listening and not
template
watching
there.
and maybe not looked at the thing, it's spelled Ondrej, and it's Papanek. Now, all the links will be in the show notes anyway. Well, thank you for that really interesting conversation, Andre. It's Scrum and where it's going, and Scrum and how it's evolving. Every year there's something slightly different in it, and I get more intrigued by it all as time goes on. So, and I imagine that you, yeah, seen the changes over the last few years. So, um, yeah, get in touch with Andre if you want to find out more. And again, thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Cheers.
Thank you so much. I have a wonderful
Oh,
evening.
wrong button.
Cheers.
How was that?